Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at one of these small form factor thin client terminal type PCs with a view to doing some budget Windows 98 gaming. This particular model is a Wyse C10LE. I think it's pronounced Wyse. Wyse is the people that make these. Wyse were a company that specialised in making these sort of terminal computers. They got bought by Dell a few years back, but the name seems to have stuck around, and I think you can still get stuff off these guys even today. Now these thin clients or terminals, they have limited sort of hardware and power on board. They would expect to be connected to a server to do a lot of their sort of heavy lifting, if you like. So typical applications for these would have perhaps been as part of a production environment on a factory floor, or maybe as point of sale machines, connected to a display, a keyboard and whatnot in a shop, ringing the orders through, taking customer details, that kind of thing. So this is one that I picked up off eBay. There's a lot of people selling these on eBay, and they sell it as a sort of Windows gaming machine. This one, it included a keyboard and a mouse. Obviously there's power supply as well, which goes into this little DC brick. And the idea is you buy one of these, you've got everything you need other than a screen to plug it into, and you can do some gaming. Most of them include, or this one included, a USB stick. There's a load of games on here. Plug that in, load the games up, off you go, have some fun. The games on this thing, there's no sort of front end or launcher. It's just a folder full of old DOS, or typically old DOS shareware and abandonware type games. However, there's a problem with it that we're going to try and address in this video and see if we can make some improvements as we go. So let's have a look around this Wyse C10LE. On the front you can see we have power button, two USB ports, headphone or line out and microphone in on 3.5mm jacks, no ports on either side. But on the back we have two more USB ports, gigabit Ethernet, DVI for display out. That's a good inclusion, so it means we can adapt back to VGA or forwards to HDMI, so we should be able to connect everything to this from modern displays all the way back to CRTs, which is great. PS2 ports for keyboard and mouse, barrel plug for 12V input, and a Kensington lock type port. Looking on the top, you can see the sellers of this one on eBay have kindly put a design for Windows 98 sticker on there. However, this particular model I've got here is manufactured July, I don't know if you can see that on the video, but July 2014. Typically 2013, 2014, 2015 was where you'd see this particular model, but sadly we were well past the use of Windows 98 at that point. So what's the problem with something like this then? It seems like an ideal little machine to be doing some Windows 98 gaming on. Well, that was my idea. Stick a keyboard and mouse into this and connect it up to a cheap old LCD screen, and I thought let the kids use it as a little sort of computer to bash around on, perhaps play some old games on. If they get a bit too eager with it, a bit too crazy with it, damage the odd thing, it's not a problem. This thing is sort of, quite tough, and there's no moving parts in here. I thought it'd make a nice, a nice little thing for them to have a play around with. However, when you put this USB stick in, or any USB stick, with the games on, and turn the power on, it will not boot when there is a USB stick in any of the ports. This is nothing to do with the boot order in the BIOS or anything like that. It's just It's just a particular quirk of these little terminals. So okay, no problem. You think, well, just copy the games to the internal storage and get rid of the USB stick. The problem is the internal storage in these is only 100 megabytes. That's it, 100 megabytes. As I say, they're terminals. They expect the majority of their heavy lifting storage requirements to be done by a server that they would have been connected to. The majority of that 100 megabytes is taken up by a very minimal stripped down installation of Windows 98. There's about 20 megabytes free, if I remember, from booting this up. So there's no space on here to put any games onto the hard drive. So what's the plan going to be? Well, we're going to open this up, see what's inside. Hopefully the internal storage will have a way of either expanding that or replacing it. And if we can get a sensible amount of storage in here, we can get the games copied onto the hard drive, and then we won't need this USB stick, and it'll make a nice little compact all-in-one Windows 98 machine for anybody to have a bash about on and have a play with. So let's get it open and see what we've got. Just before I do, I need to give a shout out to a website. It's the Parky Towers website. If you search that, you'll find it no problem, and I'll put a link down in the description. The person that runs that website has loads of information on all different terminals from Wyse and a load of other manufacturers, and it's where I've got a lot of the information from for this video. So if at any point you get stuck, or you've got a terminal similar to this that you want to do something similar with, or you're having a problem with, go check out that website. There is a heck of a lot of information on there. Right, to get into this thing, it's fairly easy. These feet, they slide on these rails. You just got to slide them off backwards. And after that, there's just this one screw here at the back. We're going to take that out, and then we should be able to separate the two halves. Always use kitchen utensils to separate your hardware. And there we go. The case takes a little bit of separating, but we got there in the end. So here's the lid. You can see we have some thermal pads onto this bit of sort of copper heat sink. That would have been making contact with the RAM chips here. You can see that they are on just a standard laptop SODIMM socket. We've got 256 meg DIMM in here. That's plenty for Windows 98, so no problem there. Underneath this big copper heat sink is the CPU. In this, it's a Wyse Eden CPU running at 1 GHz. That sounds great. It is good, don't get me wrong, but the Wyse Edens were a line of CPUs that were primarily designed for low power consumption. So put this up against a 1 GHz Athlon or Pentium 3 of the time. Would it have been a P3 or a P4? Either way, put this up against a 1 GHz CPU from AMD or Intel from the time, and they would wipe the floor with it, especially in floating point calculations. I think it was probably closer to something like a 600 megahertz Athlon or P3 equivalent perhaps. It'll still be plenty for the sort of games that we want to run on this. It's the Wyse Cx0 chipset with integrated graphics. And to give Wyse their credit, you can still get all the drivers for these chipsets and whatnot on their website. We've got an integrated PC speaker, and here's what we're interested in. This is the built-in storage. So this is a little Discon module. That's great, so that means we should be able to pop that out and replace that with something better or something bigger. And your normal coin cell, this one's been taped in, you can see it under there. So no worries in here about batteries leaking or anything like that. We should be well past that at this stage. Right, let's pop this little disc-on module out and then get something to replace it with. So as I say, this is a disc-on module. It's basically a little bit of flash memory, so think small SSD if you like, straight to, in this case, an IDE socket. Now, because of these space restraints in this is a 44-pin laptop style IDE socket, not your typical 40-pin desktop style. So if you want to get another disc-on module to replace this, specifically to go in here, it needs to be the 44-pin interface, not the 40-pin. And most disc-on modules, they stick vertically upwards out the socket. We can't do that in here because we don't have the vertical height with the top cover on. So you'll need one that is angled like this one is, and it will also need to be angled the correct way because you may be able to see there, as you know, these sockets are keyed. If you have one that's angled that way, say, it's not going to go in. But you can find these on the internet quite cheaply. So here's one that I got earlier. This is, as it happens, it's made by the same people, a Pacer, not a name I've come across before, but it's angled across just like the last one was. It's angled the correct way. This one, we have an extra chip on the back and a little jumper. We'll have to check the position of that, make sure it's set for what we want. And this one is 4 gig, so that'll give us plenty of space for a full Windows 98 install and a load of games. So all we've got to do is pop that into the socket, get the lid screwed back on, as we say, just one screw, put the legs on, and then we're going to have to install Windows 98 on here from scratch and go from there. Okay, it's been a bit of a jump forward in time. It's now well over a month since I filmed that first bit. Now, as you can see, I've got Windows 98 on here, but it's not been straightforward. There were two main problems that I've had to overcome. The first issue was simply just installing Windows 98. Obviously there's no floppy drive on here, there's no CD-ROM drive on here, so couldn't quite do a normal installation. Couple of ways around this. First one would have been to have used a USB stick. I think Phil's Computer Lab's done a video on installing Windows 98 from USB, so that would have been one way to go about it. So check that video out if you want to see a bit more about that. But the way I chose was to use a USB CD-ROM drive. Now, you can't just stick Windows 98 in the USB, your Windows 98 disk in the USB CD-ROM drive and install like that, because the installer can't see the USB CD-ROM drive. So what I did was I used a Windows XP version of the Hiren's boot CD and booted from that into the DOS environment, and then used that to partition and format the new disk that we've installed. Did one secondary small partition, about 750 megs, and the primary partition is all the rest of the 4 gig space on the disk. I then went into Windows XP from the Hiren's boot CD and took the Hiren's CD out, put the Windows installation disk in, and copied the contents of the Windows 98 installation to the 750 meg partition that I'd created on the hard disk. From there I could go back into the DOS environment, disconnect the USB CD and install Windows 98 from the files that were now copied to the hard disk and do the installation the normal way. So that was straightforward enough, not too bad. The second problem that I've had has been getting the drivers, specifically the chipset drivers, to install on here. Now the VIA chipset that's in here, it needs the VIA 4-in-1 drivers. I think they also call them the Hyperion drivers, and they're a sort of complete package that does the chipset, does the integrated graphics, does the integrated sound, all in one kind of, all in one file, if you like, all in one driver package. Now I've tried and tried and tried and tried, and I just cannot get them to install on here, hence the reason for the big delay between filming the first part of this video and this part. I've tried different versions of the drivers, I've tried different ways of installing them, I've scoured old forums and old message boards, trying to find people with similar issues, of the time, but it's all been to no avail, I'm afraid. Now the reason that I don't think they're installing, and this is only my best guess at this time, is as we saw in here earlier in the video when the top was off, was there's only one IDE port on here, and I found some forum posts from somebody who's having the same problems on a different system, and that too only had one IDE port, and their drivers were crashing and failing to install in the exact same way that they were crashing and failing to install on here. Now Microsoft did put out a hotfix for that system, but I tried the hotfix on here and it still didn't work. So maybe it is that, maybe it isn't that, I don't know. If anybody's got any better suggestions, please drop them down in the comments and let me know. I'd really like to come back to this and have another go at getting a proper complete driver installation. So what I've done instead is I've used the standard Windows drivers for the hard disk controllers. SSD's way faster than anything Windows 98 would normally have seen, so even though that might not be optimal, it's fine. It's fine for on here. For the graphics, I've used the VBE Miniport driver, which is a kind of low-level universal driver that, whilst not a bit like the chipset drivers, not taking full advantage of the chipset in here, it's better than the built-in Windows sort of Super VGA driver, and it'll be fine for what I want to use this computer for. That just left audio out of the chipset drivers, and I was scratching my head trying to think what to do with that, but I remembered the sellers included a little USB sound card, and I got the, I'd already put the Windows USB drivers on here so that I could use, thumb drives in there for getting files on and off. And to my surprise, I plugged this little USB sound card in, and it's just worked. No drivers at all. Wasn't expecting that. Not quite sure why that is or where it's pulling its drivers from, but it's working. I'm happy with that. So as I said earlier, I want this to be a little computer that the kids can bash around on, probably over the Christmas holidays. It's not going to get broken, it's not particularly valuable if it does. They're only young, so I've put on some real sort of simple games, if you like, that gets them a bit more used to using a keyboard and a mouse. So as you can see, just looking on the desktop, I've got some of the Microsoft entertainment package games. We've got some of the Plus games from Windows 98. We've got good old Space Cadet Pinball, Hover from the Windows 95 CD and whatnot. And it handles all these games absolutely fine, no problems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a few more games installed on here, so they've got plenty to have a go at, and then I'm going to get this mounted onto the back of the monitor and all the cables tidied up. This old LCD's got integrated speakers, so I've been able to plug the USB sound card straight into that. And I think I can make something using the wall mounts on the back of here to hold the little terminal to the back of the monitor. And then I can get all these cables tidied up and out the way around the back, and then there'll just be the cables for the keyboard and mouse coming out to the front, and it'll be quite small, quite compact, nice and neat. So I need to get a few more games put on here, then I get this thing built up, get it tidied up, and then we're going to have some fun with it. There's going to be a short break in videos just over the Christmas period, but I'll be back very early in the new year with some more. I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you have, give us a thumbs up, let us know. But for now, I'm just going to say thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.